While the Joe Biden campaign has been largely terrible up to this point, no real promises in terms of actual policy that will help people's lives. So no Medicare for all, no free public college, no student debt relief, no Green New Deal. But for once, there is actually an ad, a Joe Biden ad that is pretty good. So one thing that possibly Joe Biden can do well is make himself out to be the person that is not Donald Trump. And that's essentially what this ad does. So finally, they have put out an ad that I think is effective. Now, of course, look, he's making no policy promises here. Again, no real actual help for people. But what he is doing here is eliciting an emotional response, showing Donald Trump, this is real. Donald Trump went golfing over the weekend while the death toll over the coronavirus rises to almost 100,000. It is hard for me to cover Trump because all of this stuff is just, I think it's just so obvious on its face. If you are still supporting Trump, then I have nothing to say to you. I think it's obvious that Donald Trump needs to get out of power. And I thought the best way to do that, I still think the best way to do that would be with an actual campaign that is essentially the antithesis to Donald Trump, the Bernie Sanders campaign, offering real help to people's lives, offering real change, not going back to the era of Obama that led to Donald Trump, but instead instituting some real policies that will help people in the long run. So Medicare for all as being, I think, the prime example of a policy that would benefit everybody. But Joe Biden isn't doing that. And the only thing they really have to write on is that he is not Donald Trump. And that's what he's doing. And look, if this is the strategy and you don't have any real promises for people, you're not going to make any real material difference in anybody's life, this is the way to run the campaign. I mean, this is how you do it. Joe Biden, I think, should be hiding even more than he is. Because every time he comes out and he's speaking, he just makes a fool of himself. Why even bother? If your aim is to win, again, I'm not saying this in terms of like benefiting people. I'm just saying in terms of the campaign. If the campaign wants to win, they should hide him as much as possible and just focus all of their ads on how terrible Donald Trump is. That's the way to do it. That's how they got a big turnout in 2018. A lot of that turnout was because of the anti-Trump vote. And I think you're going to see a similar thing happen in 2020. Now, let's be clear here. I think a lot of voters under 45 that were Sanders supporters, I think a lot of them aren't going to come out because they were engaged in politics because of what Bernie Sanders spoke to. A lot of people, in media don't realize or don't acknowledge anyways that a lot of the people that supported Bernie Sanders are people that aren't normally into politics, are people that would not be voting if it weren't for Bernie Sanders. So the idea that Joe Biden can simply get those people over through Bernie Sanders and his endorsement of Joe Biden is completely insane. This does not fall on Bernie Sanders. Bernie Sanders cannot control his base. His base is made up of people that actually supported him because of what Bernie Sanders fought for. So Bernie Sanders telling people to vote for Joe Biden that's not going to accomplish anything. It's on Joe Biden to be able to speak to those voters. And he's not doing that. So in lieu of that, what Joe Biden has to do is speak to how terrible Donald Trump is, or not speak to it and let the ad speak to it without him ever appearing on camera. So this is how they're going to do it. And right now you're seeing recent polling that I covered over the weekend favoring Joe Biden. So Joe Biden leading by 11 points in one poll, leading even in states like Georgia and Arizona. So I think Joe Biden does have the potential here to win simply through turnout of people that did not come out in 2016 that otherwise are reliable Democratic voters. So back in 2016, a lot of people really did not think that Hillary was going to win. Or sorry, that Trump was going to win. They thought Hillary for sure had this on lockdown, and that was because of the media and how they covered the election. The media was all, if you go back to 2016, all the polling, everything showed, oh, Hillary definitely has on lockdown 100%. What the media did not, or at least what the polling did not account for, was how many people that don't normally vote were going to come out and vote for Donald Trump. Or also, how many people over the phone in polling may have said, I don't know who I'm going to vote for, or I'm going to vote for Hillary, and in fact, they voted for Donald Trump. The difference this time, and you saw it with 2018, is that turnout will be high. And that is because of the anti-Trump vote. Trump is already president. There's no fear of, or there is no assumption that Biden's going to win. In fact, there's a fear that Trump's going to win, which will drive Democratic turnout. And when turnout is high, Democrats win. Now, generally, for turnout to be high, Democrats actually need to speak to people's needs. So like Barack Obama back in 2008 had this message of hope and change. That brought Democratic voters out and led him to victory. This is a rare case now because Joe Biden, while he should be doing that as well, while he should be speaking to those hopes and desires and needs that people have in terms of healthcare, wages, whatever it is, the difference this time is that Donald Trump is historically hated by so many people. Many of those people that did not vote in 2016 that are now engaged in what is going on, engaged in politics because of how much they hate Donald Trump. So regardless of what Joe Biden says or does, they will come out to vote for Joe Biden simply to vote against Donald Trump. And the only way that Joe Biden can screw that up is if he appears on camera more often and says something stupid, which he always does. So, I mean, at this point, if I'm advising the campaign, this is what they have to do. They have to put out ads like this. And again, I would advise them to back actual policies like Medicare for all, but they're not going to do that because of the corporate interests, the wealthy interests that back their campaign. Joe Biden's simply not going to back, a $16 trillion Green New Deal or Medicare for all. So if that's not happening, then this is what the campaign has to do. Biden has to lay low and release ads like this that simply attack Donald Trump. And one more thing that I forgot to mention. This is a message for progressive voters, more left-wing voters, people that supported, Bernie Sanders, that do not like Joe Biden for obvious reasons and don't plan to vote for him. I'm not going to shame anybody into voting whatever way. I think, first of all, the election's 6 months away. Nobody should even be pledging their vote to anybody at this point. Fight for what you want until the very end. But understand here, the one obvious benefit that's almost never mentioned when it comes to the potential of Democrats controlling the White House is that there are no longer any excuses for the Democratic Party. Right now, they continue to hide behind Donald Trump. You see how inadequate the bills that Democrats in the House put up during this crisis. If Democrats are in control of the White House, they can't hide anymore. There's no deferring to, oh, well, Donald Trump, look what he's doing. He's horrible. They can't do that anymore. It is now on Democrats. It would now be on Democrats to actually fight and help people. And that also frees up the few left-wing or progressive politicians that actually exist in Washington, like Bernie Sanders, like AOC, like Jayapal, where if Democrats are in power, that then allows them to fight Democratic leadership harder than they would be otherwise. And I think this is a point that is lost on a lot of people. The reason why you're not seeing Bernie Sanders, AOC, or others fight Democratic leadership all that hard right now or at all is because Donald Trump's in power. And they feel, this is my assumption, but I think it's a fair assumption. They feel that if they attack Democratic leadership too much, then it'll look bad on them because they aren't focusing their fight on who's in the White House being Donald Trump. But if you look back to, say, when Barack Obama was in power and you had Bernie Sanders go out there and publicly fight Barack Obama when it came to Obama almost cutting Social Security. Obama almost cut Social Security in the grand bargain. And Bernie Sanders was out there fighting that. That only happens if Democrats are in the White House. You're only going to see that kind of fight from within the party, or I mean, in the case of Sanders, an independent, but still within the party. You're only going to see that if Democrats are in power in the White House, because there are no excuses anymore. So look, again, there's 6 months till the election. We can continue discussing this, but understand that the left has zero power, zero, when conservatives are in charge. But when Democrats are in charge, there's at least the avenue, the potential to have some kind of impact on the White House. And when you look at the few victories that have happened over the past, 50 years, be it on civil rights or gay marriage, that happened under Democrats. Now, you could say, yes, of course, it didn't go far enough. It took way too long. Of course. But still, there was progress made, some progress made under Democrats. You're not going to have that progress made under Republicans. So I'm just going to leave that out there. I mean, chew on this. Again, you got 6 months. No one is telling you to commit to anything. I just think it's important to understand, especially how much more power movements and politicians, progressive politicians, would have over the Democratic Party if they're actually in the White House.